Clara Finley's trembling fingers clutched her handkerchief as she sat alone on the church steps, her white wedding dress soiled at the hem from the dusty ground of Promise Creek, Arizona territory. It was 1878, and she had traveled over 2,000 miles from Boston to marry a man she'd never met, a man who had just left her waiting at the altar. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. The church bell had long since fallen silent, and the few townsfolk who had gathered to witness the ceremony had dispersed with pitying glances. Clara's tears had carved clean tracks through the fine layer of trail dust on her cheeks, but she'd stopped crying now. Empty inside, she stared at the horizon where the golden plains met the cloudless blue sky. "Miss, you all right?" Clara looked up to see a tall figure silhouetted against the sun. As he shifted, she made out a lean man with broad shoulders, weather-beaten skin, and kind eyes the color of worn leather. His clothes were dusty, his boots scuffed, and the Stetson in his hands had seen better days. "Do I look all right to you, sir?" Clara replied, her voice hoarse from crying. The stranger stepped closer, revealing a face that was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and lines around his eyes that spoke of long days under the sun. "No, madam, you surely don't." He offered a small, sympathetic smile. "Name's Caleb Reed. I was passing through when I heard about what happened. Samuel Wallace is a damn fool, pardon my language." Clara looked away. "A fool who left me with nothing. No husband, no home, no future." Caleb shifted his weight, considering her for a moment before saying, "Let me take you home." Clara's head snapped up. "I have no home, Mr. Reed. That's precisely the problem." "I meant to my ranch," he clarified. "Just until you figure things out. I've got a spare room. It ain't much, but it's clean and you'd be safe there. My sister Catherine stays with me when she's not teaching at the schoolhouse in town." Clara studied him warily. "Why would you help me?"
"You don't know me."
"Because nobody should be left alone like this," Caleb said simply. "And I reckon you could use a friend right now." Clara hesitated, weighing her limited options. She had spent nearly every penny on her journey west. The boarding house would only extend her credit so far, and the stares of pity were becoming unbearable. "Your sister lives with you?" she asked cautiously. "Yes, madam. When she's not staying in town. She'll be home by Saturday." He paused. "I give you my word as a gentleman. You'll be treated with respect." Clara drew a deep breath and stood, brushing dust from her dress. "Very well, Mr. Reed. I accept your offer. But only until I can make other arrangements." Relief crossed Caleb's face. "That's fair. My wagon's just down the street." As they walked through town, Clara felt the stares of the locals, their whispers following her like shadows. Caleb seemed to sense her discomfort and positioned himself between her and their curious gazes. "Don't mind them," he said quietly. "Small towns run on gossip, but they'll find something new to talk about soon enough." His wagon was simple but well-maintained. Caleb helped her up, careful not to touch her more than necessary, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they left Promise Creek behind, Clara gazed at the vast expanse of prairie and distant mountains. "How far is your ranch?" she asked. "About an hour's ride," Caleb replied. "It's not much compared to some, but it's good land. 1,500 acres, mostly for cattle." Clara nodded, falling silent again. The rhythmic clop of the horses' hooves and the creaking of the wagon wheels filled the space between them. "I'm sorry about your wedding," Caleb said after a while. "If you don't mind me asking, how did you come to be engaged to Wallace in the first place?" Clara folded her hands in her lap. "It was arranged through a mail-order bride service. My father died last year, leaving substantial debts. Our home was sold to cover them. I had few options." She spoke the words flatly, having rehearsed this explanation many times. Mr. Wallace wrote beautiful letters describing his successful ranch and his desire for a cultured wife to help build a proper home. He sent money for my passage. And when you arrived? He took one look at me yesterday when I stepped off the stagecoach and seemed disappointed. Clara swallowed hard. He was polite enough, but distant. This morning, he sent a note to my room at the boarding house, saying the wedding would proceed as planned. Then, he simply never appeared. Caleb's jaw tightened. Wallace never had much of a ranch to speak of. Mostly he gambles and borrows money. Folks have been waiting for him to bring home this wealthy Eastern bride he's been bragging about. Clara gave a bitter laugh. Wealthy? I arrived with one trunk and $10 to my name. Then you both misrepresented yourselves, Caleb observed. Clara stiffened. I never claimed to be wealthy. I told him I was educated and came from a good family, which is true. Caleb nodded, looking chastened. I apologize. That was unfair of me. They fell silent again as the wagon rolled on. The landscape changed gradually, with rocky outcroppings and scattered pine trees breaking up the prairie. Finally, they crested a hill, and Clara saw a modest ranch house nestled in a small valley, with several outbuildings, corrals, and cattle grazing in the distance. This is Reed Ranch, Caleb said with quiet pride. Been building it up for 5 years now. As they approached, Clara noticed a small garden beside the house and smoke rising from the chimney. The house itself was simple but solid-looking, with a covered porch wrapping around the front. Someone's there, she observed. That'll be Mrs. Gunderson. She comes by twice a week to help with cooking and washing. Good thing, too, or Kath and I would likely starve. A smile tugged at his lips. He pulled the wagon to a stop, jumped down, and came around to help Clara. Her legs were stiff from sitting, and she stumbled slightly as she stepped down. Caleb caught her elbow to steady her, then quickly released it when she was stable. Sorry, he murmured. No need to apologize, Clara said, suddenly aware of how bedraggled she must look in her dusty wedding dress. A plump, gray-haired woman appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of Clara. Mrs. Gunderson, Caleb called. We have a guest who'll be staying with us for a spell. This is Miss Clara Finley from Boston. Mrs. Gunderson hurried down the steps. My goodness, child, what happened to you? Before Clara could answer, Caleb said quietly, Samuel Wallace happened, Agnes. Understanding dawned on the older woman's face. That no good. She stopped herself and took Clara's arm. Come inside, dear. Let's get you out of that dress and into something comfortable. You look like you could use a hot meal and a warm bath. Clara followed gratefully, shooting a glance back at Caleb, who nodded encouragingly. I'll see to the horses and bring in your trunk, he said. The inside of the ranch house was surprisingly cozy. The main room served as both parlor and dining area, with a stone fireplace along one wall. Simple but sturdy furniture filled the space, and shelves lined with books caught Clara's eye immediately. Mrs. Gunderson led her to a bedroom off the main room. This is Catherine's room, but she won't mind you using it until she returns from town. The room was neat and feminine, with a quilt-covered bed, a small desk, and a washstand. I'll heat water for a bath, Mrs. Gunderson said. There's a tub in the back room. Meanwhile, let me find you something to wear. You and Catherine look to be about the same size. You're very kind, Clara said, her voice catching. I don't know how to thank you all. Mrs. Gunderson patted her hand. No need for thanks. We take care of our own out here, and anyone under Caleb Reed's protection counts as one of our own. An hour later, Clara sat at the kitchen table wearing a borrowed dress, her damp hair braided down her back, feeling more human than she had in days. Mrs. Gunderson had prepared a hearty stew with fresh bread, and Caleb joined them after washing up. Feeling better? He asked, taking a seat across from her. Clara nodded. Much. Thank you. They ate mostly in silence, with Mrs. Gunderson occasionally filling the quiet with local news. After dinner, the older woman insisted on cleaning up alone. You two go sit on the porch, she said. The evening air is good for clearing the head. Caleb led Clara outside, where two rocking chairs sat facing the setting sun. The sky was ablaze with orange and pink, and in the distance, cattle lowed as they settled for the night. It's beautiful here, Clara said softly. It grows on you, Caleb agreed. When I first came west, I thought I'd make my fortune and go back east. But now I can't imagine living anywhere else. Where are you from originally? Clara asked. Pennsylvania. My father was a blacksmith. Caleb leaned back in his chair. After the war, there wasn't much left for me there. I headed west, worked as a ranch hand for a few years, then staked my claim here. Sent for Catherine once I had the house built. You fought in the war? Caleb nodded, his expression growing distant. Union cavalry. Was at Gettysburg, among other places. Clara sensed his reluctance to elaborate. My brother Frederick fought as well. He didn't come home. I'm sorry, Caleb said quietly. They sat in companionable silence as the sky darkened and stars appeared. Clara found herself studying Caleb's profile in the fading light. There was something solid about him, a steadiness that she found reassuring after the tumult of recent days. What will you do now? He asked eventually. Clara sighed. I don't know. I have no money to return east, even if I wanted to. There's nothing for me there anyway. You could stay in Promise Creek. Towns like this always need educated women. You might teach, or work in the mercantile. Perhaps, Clara said, though the thought of facing the townspeople after being jilted was mortifying. What about my situation? Won't people talk? Caleb's mouth quirked in a half-smile. People always talk. But you didn't do anything wrong, Miss Finley. You're the wronged party here. Before Clara could respond, Mrs. Gunderson appeared in the doorway. I've finished up inside and need to head home before full dark. Will you be all right, dear? Clara rose from her chair. Yes, thank you for everything, Mrs. Gunderson. I'll hitch up the wagon and take you home, Agnes, Caleb said, standing. Nonsense. My Olaf is waiting just down the road. You stay and keep Miss Finley company. She patted Clara's hand. I'll be back on Thursday. You rest up, dear. After Mrs. Gunderson left, an awkward silence fell between Clara and Caleb. I should turn in as well, Clara said. It's been quite a day. Caleb nodded. Of course. I'll be out in the bunkhouse if you need anything. There's a rifle above the door and a pistol in the drawer beside the bed, just in case. Clara raised her eyebrows. In case of what? Probably nothing. But out here, it's better to be prepared. He hesitated. Good night, Miss Finley. Good night, Mr. Reed. And thank you again. Alone in Catherine's room, Clara sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself contemplate the full gravity of her situation. She was stranded in a strange territory with no money, no connections, and no prospects. Yet somehow, the panic she expected didn't come. Instead, she felt a curious sense of freedom. For the first time in her life, no one was telling her what to do or who to be. With that thought, she blew out the lamp and fell into the first peaceful sleep she'd had since leaving Boston. Morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the smell of coffee. Clara dressed quickly in another of Catherine's dresses, pinned up her hair, and made her way to the kitchen. Caleb was already there, frying bacon on the stove. Good morning, he said, looking up. Hope I didn't wake you. Not at all, Clara replied. I'm used to early rising. Caleb gestured to the coffee pot. Help yourself. I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage bacon and eggs. Clara poured herself a cup, then moved to his side. Let me help. It's the least I can do. Together they prepared a simple breakfast, moving around each other in the small kitchen with surprising ease. As they sat down to eat, Clara found herself studying Caleb more openly. In the morning light, She could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes and the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "What will you do today?" she asked. "Mending fences in the north pasture," he replied. "I've got a few hands that help with the cattle, but there's always work to be done." Clara nodded. "And is there something I could do? I don't want to be idle." Caleb looked surprised. "You don't have to work, Miss Finley. You're a guest." "Please call me Clara," she said. "And I would prefer to be useful. I may be from the city, but I'm not afraid of hard work." A smile spread across Caleb's face, transforming his features. "All right then, Clara. There's always plenty to do around a ranch. Can you ride?" "I had lessons as a girl, though it's been some time. We could start there. I could show you around the property." After breakfast, Caleb led Clara to the stables, where he introduced her to a gentle mare named Daisy. "She's Catherine's horse," he explained, stroking the animal's nose. "Good-tempered and patient with beginners." Clara approached cautiously, holding out her hand for the mare to sniff. "Hello, Daisy," she murmured. The horse nickered softly and butted her head against Clara's palm. "She likes you," Caleb observed, saddling his own horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding. With Caleb's help, Clara mounted Daisy, adjusting to the feel of being on horseback again. Her riding habit had been packed away in her trunk, so she rode side saddle in Catherine's dress, feeling somewhat precarious but determined. They set out at a leisurely pace, Caleb pointing out landmarks and explaining the operation of the ranch. Clara listened attentively, asking questions and gradually relaxing into the rhythm of riding. "You're a natural," Caleb commented as they paused atop a ridge overlooking a creek where cattle gathered to drink. Clara laughed. "Hardly, but thank you. It's coming back to me. How is it that a Boston society lady knows how to ride?" he asked. "I wasn't exactly society," Clara corrected. "My father was a professor at Harvard. We were comfortable but not wealthy. He believed in a well-rounded education for both my brother and me. Rather progressive of him, actually." "What did he teach?" "Literature. He specialized in Shakespeare." Clara smiled at the memory. "Our house was filled with books. Every evening, he would read aloud to us not just Shakespeare, but Dickens, Austen, even newspapers and scientific journals." "You miss him," Caleb observed softly. Clara nodded. "Every day." "After Frederick died in the war, Papa was never the same. I think his heart was simply worn out from grief." "And your mother?" "She passed when I was 12. Consumption." Clara straightened her spine. "But enough about my sad history. Tell me about your sister. What's she like?" Caleb's expression warmed. "Catherine is a force of nature. Stubborn as a mule, smart as a whip, and kind-hearted to a fault. She followed me out here 2 years ago, determined to bring civilization to the frontier," she said. "She sounds wonderful," Clara said, meaning it. "She is. She'll like you." Caleb checked the position of the sun. "We should head back if we're going to repair that fence before sundown." As they rode back toward the ranch house, Clara found herself studying the landscape with new eyes. The vastness that had seemed intimidating yesterday now felt exhilarating. The endless sky, the rolling plains, the distant mountains, there was a raw beauty here unlike anything in Boston. Back at the ranch, Caleb showed Clara to the tool shed where he gathered what they needed for the fence repair. He loaded the supplies onto a wagon, and they set off again, this time toward the northern boundary of the property. "Have you lived out here long?" Clara asked as they bumped along the rutted trail. 5 years, Caleb replied. "Started with just 100 acres and 20 head of cattle. Been expanding bit by bit." He glanced at her. "It's not much compared to the big spreads, but it's mine, free and clear." They reached a section of fence that had been damaged, likely by cattle pushing against it. Caleb jumped down from the wagon and offered Clara his hand. She took it, noticing the calluses on his palm and the gentle strength in his grip. I'll show you how to replace a post, he said. It's hard work, but satisfying. For the next 2 hours, Clara worked alongside Caleb, holding tools, handing him nails, and learning how to test the stability of fence posts. The sun was hot, and soon she was sweating through Catherine's borrowed dress, her hands dirty and her face flushed. You're doing well, Caleb said, pausing to wipe his brow with a bandana. Most city folks would have given up by now. Clara laughed. I'm tougher than I look, Mr. Reed. Caleb, he corrected. If I'm calling you Clara, you should call me Caleb. Caleb, she repeated, liking the way his name felt in her mouth. They worked in companionable silence for a while longer. Clara was hammering a nail into a crossbeam when she missed and struck her thumb instead. She yelped in pain, dropping the hammer. Caleb was at her side instantly. Let me see, he said, taking her hand in his. He examined her thumb gently. It'll bruise, but the skin's not broken. First rule of ranch work, there's always a cost in blood, sweat, or tears. Clara looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Which one did you pay today? His eyes met hers, and something shifted in the air between them. Sweat mostly, he said, his voice lower than before. Though seeing you in pain might count for tears. He was still holding her hand, his thumb brushing lightly over her injured one. Clara's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she thought he might lean closer. Instead, he released her hand and stepped back. We should get some cold water on that, he said, his tone brisk again. We've done enough for today anyway. On the ride back to the ranch house, Clara found herself sneaking glances at Caleb's profile, wondering about the moment that had passed between them. There was something compelling about him, his quiet strength, his kindness, the way he seemed comfortable in his own skin. It was too soon, she knew, to be feeling anything for anyone. Her heart was still raw from humiliation. And yet, the days fell into a rhythm after that. Each morning, Clara would rise early and help prepare breakfast. Then she would accompany Caleb on his rounds of the ranch, learning about cattle breeding, water management, and the countless other tasks that kept the operation running. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, talking until the stars came out. Clara learned that Caleb had been wounded at Cold Harbor, a bullet grazing his left shoulder that still troubled him in cold weather. He told her about his journey west after the war, working on cattle drives and saving every penny until he could buy his own land. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood in Boston, her love of books, and her dreams of someday becoming a writer. On the third day, Mrs. Gunderson arrived as promised, bringing with her a bundle of fabric. I mentioned your situation to the ladies at church, she explained to Clara, and they sent these. Not much, but enough to make you a dress or two of your own. Clara was touched by the gesture. That's very kind, but I couldn't possibly accept. Nonsense, Mrs. Gunderson interrupted. Consider it a welcome gift. Besides, you can't keep wearing Catherine's things forever. With Mrs. Gunderson's help, Clara spent the afternoon cutting and pinning a pattern for a simple day dress. As they worked, the older woman shared the local gossip, including the fact that Samuel Wallace had been seen boarding a stagecoach east, apparently fleeing his creditors. Good riddance, Mrs. Gunderson declared. You're better off without him, dear. Though I am sorry for the hurt he caused you. Clara was surprised to realize that the pain of rejection had already begun to fade. It's strange, she admitted. I barely knew him, really. I think I'm more embarrassed than heartbroken. Mrs. Gunderson nodded wisely. Sometimes what seems like the worst thing that could happen turns out to be a blessing in disguise. That evening, after Mrs. Gunderson had gone, Clara and Caleb sat on the porch as usual. The air was cooler than previous nights, hinting at the approach of autumn. Catherine will be home tomorrow, Caleb said. She's eager to meet you. I received a letter from her today. I'm looking forward to meeting her as well, Clara replied. Though I hope she won't mind finding a stranger in her home. She won't, Caleb assured her. Kath has a big heart. Besides, she's been after me to find some civilizing influence for the place. Clara smiled at that. Is that what I am? A civilizing influence. Among other things, Caleb said softly, his eyes meeting hers in the gathering dusk. Clara felt a flutter in her chest. What other things? Before Caleb could answer, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both turn. A rider was coming up the drive at a gallop. Caleb stood, his hand moving instinctively to the pistol at his hip. The rider reined in sharply before the porch. "Mr. Reed," called a young voice, "Pa sent me to fetch you. There's trouble at town. A fire at the Mercantile." Caleb was already moving. "I'll saddle up. Clara, stay here with Timothy." "I want to help," Clara protested, rising to her feet. "It's too dangerous," Caleb said firmly. "Please stay here. I'll be back as soon as I can." Before she could argue further, he was striding toward the stables. Minutes later, he galloped past, calling over his shoulder, "Bar the door after us." Clara watched him disappear into the darkness, worry gnawing at her stomach. She turned to the young messenger, a boy of perhaps 12. "Come inside, Timothy." "Are you hungry?" The boy followed her in, looking around curiously. "Yes, madam. Thank you." As Clara prepared a simple meal of bread and cold meat, she questioned Timothy about the fire. He didn't know much, only that it had started in the back of the Mercantile and was spreading fast when his father sent him to fetch help from the outlying farms. After Timothy had eaten, Clara insisted he take Caleb's bed for the night. "It's too late for you to ride back alone," she said. "Your parents would want you safe." The boy didn't protest, falling asleep almost immediately. Clara, however, found sleep elusive. She sat by the window, watching the distant glow of the fire on the horizon, praying that Caleb and the other volunteers would be safe. It was nearly dawn when she heard a horse approach. Clara rushed to the door, rifle in hand, before recognizing Caleb's familiar silhouette. She set the gun aside and ran out to meet him. Caleb dismounted wearily, his clothes and face blackened with soot. Without thinking, Clara threw her arms around him. He stiffened in surprise, then returned the embrace, his arms strong around her waist. "You're safe," she breathed against his chest. "I'm safe," he confirmed, his voice hoarse from smoke. "The fire's out, but the Mercantile's a loss, I'm afraid." Fortunately, no one was badly hurt. Clara stepped back, suddenly aware of her impropriety. "I was worried," she said, smoothing her skirts. "Timothy is asleep inside. I thought it best he stay the night." Caleb nodded. "Good thinking. I'm sure his parents will be grateful." He swayed slightly on his feet. "You're exhausted," Clara said, taking his arm. "Come inside. I'll heat water for you to wash, and then you need to rest." Caleb didn't protest as she led him into the house. While he washed away the worst of the soot at the kitchen sink, Clara prepared a simple breakfast. Timothy woke to the smell of coffee and joined them, eager to hear about the fire and return home to tell his family all was well. After the boy left, Clara insisted Caleb get some sleep. "You've been up all night fighting that fire. The ranch won't fall apart if you rest for a few hours." Too tired to argue, Caleb retreated to his bedroom. Clara busied herself with household chores, finishing the dress she had started with Mrs. Gunderson and preparing a hearty stew for dinner. As she worked, she reflected on her reaction to Caleb's return, the overwhelming relief she'd felt seeing him safe, the way her heart had raced when he held her. It was too soon, she told herself. She barely knew him, and yet, in just a few days, he had become important to her in a way she couldn't quite explain. Caleb emerged from his room mid-afternoon, looking refreshed though still tired around the eyes. "Something smells good," he said, inhaling deeply. "Beef stew," Clara replied. "It'll be ready by dinner time. Are you feeling better?"
"Much.
"Thank you for taking care of things while I was gone." He poured himself a cup of coffee and joined her at the table where she was mending one of his shirts. "You didn't have to do that," he said, nodding at the mending. Clara shrugged. "I wanted to be useful. Besides, I noticed this was torn when I was doing the washing." Caleb watched her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You've settled in quickly here." "I suppose I have," Clara admitted. "There's something about this place that feels right." Before Caleb could respond, they heard the sound of a wagon approaching. He stood and looked out the window. "It's Catherine," he said, a smile spreading across his face. Clara set aside her mending and smoothed her hair, suddenly nervous about meeting Caleb's sister. What would Catherine think of her presence here? Would she resent another woman in her home? Caleb went outside to greet his sister, and Clara followed more slowly. A slender woman with the same dark hair and warm eyes as Caleb was climbing down from a wagon loaded with supplies. She embraced her brother tightly, then turned curious eyes toward Clara. "You must be Miss Finley," she said, stepping forward with an outstretched hand. "Caleb wrote to me about your situation. I'm Catherine Reed. Everyone calls me Kath." Clara took her hand, relieved by the warmth in the other woman's voice. "Please call me Clara. I hope you don't mind my staying in your room." "I can move my things." "Nonsense," Catherine interrupted, linking her arm through Clara's. "I'm delighted to have another woman around the place. Come help me unload these supplies, and you can tell me all about yourself." As they carried boxes and bags into the house, Catherine chattered easily, asking questions about Boston and Clara's journey west. There was a directness to her that Clara found refreshing after the often artificial social niceties of Eastern society. "I heard about what Samuel Wallace did," Catherine said as they unpacked dry goods in the pantry. "That man has always been a scoundrel, but this was low even for him." Clara winced slightly. "Yes, well, I'm beginning to think it was for the best. We would have made each other miserable." Catherine studied her with shrewd eyes. "And how are you finding ranch life? Quite different from Boston, I imagine." "Very different," Clara agreed. "But not in a bad way. There's a freedom here that I never experienced back east." "And how do you find my brother?" Catherine asked casually, though her eyes were keen. Clara felt her cheeks warm. "He's been very kind." A knowing smile played at Catherine's lips. "Caleb has always been kind. It's his nature. But he seems especially solicitous where you're concerned." Before Clara could formulate a response, Caleb appeared in the doorway. "Need any help with those supplies?" "We've got it under control," Catherine assured him. "You look dead on your feet, brother. Clara told me about the fire. Why don't you rest while we finish dinner?" "I've already slept half the day away," Caleb protested. "And you clearly need more," his sister retorted. "Go sit on the porch at least. We'll call you when dinner's ready." Outnumbered, Caleb retreated, and Catherine turned back to Clara with a conspiratorial smile. "He never could win an argument with me. Now, tell me more about yourself. Caleb mentioned you're educated?" Over the next hour, as they prepared dinner together, Clara found herself sharing more with Catherine than she had with anyone in a long time. The younger woman was an attentive listener, asking insightful questions and sharing her own experiences in return. "I think you would make an excellent teacher," Catherine said as they set the table. "We're desperately short of qualified educators out here. Most of the children in Promise Creek get only the most basic schooling because I can only manage 3 days a week at the schoolhouse." "Me? A teacher?" Clara hadn't considered the possibility. "Why not? You're well educated, you have a way with words, and you clearly enjoy learning. The town council has been trying to hire another teacher for months." Catherine paused, studying Clara's face. "Unless you're planning to return east?" Clara shook her head slowly. "No. There's nothing for me there now. But I'm not sure I'm qualified to teach." "You're more qualified than most out here," Catherine assured her. "Think about it at least. You need to build a life for yourself, and Promise Creek needs good people." The idea took root in Clara's mind as they called Caleb in for dinner. Could she be a teacher? It would give her independence, a purpose. And it would mean staying in the area, near Caleb and Catherine, who were quickly becoming important to her. Dinner was a lively affair, with Catherine regaling them with stories from town and Caleb sharing ranch news. Clara found herself laughing more than she had in months, caught up in the easy camaraderie between the siblings. After dinner, the three of them sat on the porch watching the sunset. Catherine, claiming fatigue from her journey, retired early, leaving Clara and Caleb alone in the gathering dusk. "Your sister is wonderful," Clara said after a comfortable silence. "She likes you," Caleb replied. "I can tell. I like her too." Clara hesitated. She suggested I might apply for the teaching position in Promise Creek. Caleb turned to her, his expression brightening. "That's a fine idea. You'd be a natural teacher." "You think so?" "I know so. I've seen how patiently you explain things to Timothy and how quickly you pick up new skills." He paused. "Does this mean you're considering staying in the area?" Clara met his gaze steadily. "I am. There's nothing for me back east, and I've come to care for this place. And the people in it." Something flickered in Caleb's eyes. "I'm glad to hear that, Clara. Very glad." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Clara's heart began to race as Caleb leaned slightly toward her, his eyes dropping to her lips. For a breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he cleared his throat and leaned back in his chair. "It's getting late," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "We should turn in." Clara nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Of course. Good night, Caleb." "Good night, Clara." As she prepared for bed in Catherine's room, now shared with its rightful occupant, Clara found herself replaying the moment on the porch. Had she misread Caleb's intentions? Was he not attracted to her after all? Or was he simply being cautious, mindful of her recent heartbreak? Catherine's voice broke into her thoughts. "You care for my brother, don't you?" Clara turned, startled to find Catherine watching her from the other bed. He's been very kind to me." "That's not what I asked," Catherine said gently. "I see the way you look at him, Clara. And the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching." Heat flooded Clara's cheeks. "It's too soon. I barely know him." "Sometimes the heart knows what it wants before the head catches up," Catherine observed. "For what it's worth, I think you would be good for each other. Caleb needs someone like you in his life, someone with spirit and intelligence who can appreciate the man he is." Clara sat on the edge of her bed, considering Catherine's words. "Even if that's true, I can't expect him to take on the burden of a penniless, jilted bride." Catherine snorted. "Is that how you see yourself? Because it's not how he sees you, I promise. Caleb admires strength, and you've shown plenty of that." "Has he said something to you?" Clara asked, unable to keep the hope from her voice. "He doesn't have to. I know my brother." Catherine blew out the lamp beside her bed. "Just give it time, Clara. Some things can't be rushed." In the darkness, Clara lay awake thinking about Catherine's words and the almost kiss on the porch. Perhaps Catherine was right, time would reveal what was meant to be. With that thought, she finally drifted off to sleep. The next morning brought a flurry of activity as Catherine announced she would be returning to town to speak with the school board about Clara. Despite Clara's protests that it was too soon, Catherine was adamant. "The school year is about to begin, and they're desperate," she insisted. "At least let me mention your interest. If they want to meet you, you can decide then whether to pursue it." Caleb, to Clara's surprise, supported his sister's plan. "It can't hurt to explore the possibility," he said over breakfast. "And I'd be happy to accompany you to town if they want to meet with you." Outnumbered, Clara agreed, and Catherine departed with a promise to return the following day with news. Left alone with Caleb once more, Clara felt a new awareness between them, as if Catherine's departure had removed some invisible barrier. What would you like to do today? Caleb asked as they cleared the breakfast dishes. I need to check the herd in the south pasture, but that won't take all day. Could you teach me to shoot? Clara asked impulsively. At his surprised look, she explained, if I'm going to live out here, I should know how to protect myself, shouldn't I? A slow smile spread across Caleb's face. You're full of surprises, Clara Finley. All right, we'll make a markswoman of you yet. After the dishes were done, Caleb took Clara to a clearing behind the house. He set up empty bottles on a fallen log, then showed her how to hold the rifle, explaining the mechanics of loading and firing. The key is to breathe steadily, he said, standing close behind her, his hands guiding hers on the weapon. Inhale, then exhale slowly as you squeeze the trigger. Clara was acutely aware of his chest pressed against her back, his breath warm on her ear. Trying to focus on the target rather than his proximity, she followed his instructions. The rifle kicked against her shoulder when she fired, stronger than she'd expected, but the bottle on the log shattered satisfyingly. I did it, she exclaimed, turning to Caleb with a delighted smile. Natural talent, he agreed, his eyes warm with approval. Let's try again. They spent the morning practicing, Clara improving with each shot. By the time they stopped for lunch, she could hit targets consistently at a reasonable distance. You're a quick study, Caleb said as they walked back to the house. Most people take much longer to develop an accurate aim. Clara felt a glow of pride at his praise. I've always been a determined student. My father used to say I was tenacious to a fault. It's no fault to be tenacious, Caleb replied. Out here, persistence is often the difference between success and failure. After a simple lunch, they rode out to check on the cattle. The day was perfect clear blue sky, a gentle breeze, and wildflowers dotting the prairie. Clara had become more comfortable on horseback, and she enjoyed the rhythmic motion as Daisy trotted alongside Caleb's gelding. The cattle were grazing peacefully in the south pasture, overseen by one of Caleb's ranch hands, a weathered man named Pete, who tipped his hat respectfully to Clara. Everything quiet? Caleb asked him. Mostly, Pete replied. Found some tracks along the west fence line that might be rustlers scouting. Nothing missing yet, but worth keeping an eye on. Caleb frowned. I'll ride out there tomorrow with the boys. Thanks for the warning. As they rode back toward the ranch house, Clara noticed Caleb was preoccupied. Are you worried about rustlers? She asked. He glanced at her. It's always a concern, especially as winter approaches. Cattle become more valuable, and desperate men get ideas. Is it dangerous? It can be, Caleb admitted. Rustlers aren't known for their gentle nature. But we're well prepared, and most avoid trouble if they can see a ranch is properly defended. Clara nodded, trying not to show her concern. The peaceful existence of the past few days had almost made her forget the dangers of frontier life. The threat of rustlers was a stark reminder that violence was never far away in this untamed territory. Back at the ranch, they settled into domestic tasks, Caleb repairing a broken chair while Clara prepared dinner. There was something comforting about the quiet companionship, the casual conversation, the shared work. Clara found herself imagining a future filled with such moments, and the thought both thrilled and frightened her. After dinner, they took their customary places on the porch. The evening was cooler than usual, prompting Caleb to bring out a blanket which Clara draped across her lap. The gesture was simple but intimate, another small step in their growing closeness. Tell me about your dreams, Caleb said after they had sat in comfortable silence for a while. Before all this happened, what did you want from life? Clara considered the question. I wanted to write, she admitted. I still do. Stories, maybe even a novel someday. I've kept journals since I was a girl. What kind of stories? All kinds. When I was younger, I wrote adventures, pirates and explorers and buried treasure. She smiled at the memory. Later, I became interested in people's inner lives. What makes them who they are, the choices they make, the consequences they face. You should keep writing, Caleb said. The West is full of stories waiting to be told. Perhaps I will. Clara turned toward him. What about you? What are your dreams? Caleb was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the distant horizon. I want to build something lasting, he finally said. A place that will endure after I'm gone. A legacy of sorts. He paused. And I want a family to share it with. Children to pass it on to. The simple honesty of his answer touched Clara deeply. That's a beautiful dream, she said softly. Caleb's eyes met hers, and once again that electric awareness passed between them. This time he didn't look away. Clara, he said, his voice low, I know it's too soon. You've been through a lot, and we've only known each other a short time. But I find myself thinking about you in ways that go beyond friendship. Clara's heart raced. I think about you too, she whispered. Caleb reached out slowly and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. I don't want to rush you. You need time to heal, to figure out your path. But I wanted you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here. Clara turned her hand in his, intertwining their fingers. Thank you for saying that, she said. It means more than you know. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, watching as stars appeared in the darkening sky. No more words were needed. The simple touch said everything. The next day, Catherine returned from town with exciting news. The school board was eager to meet Clara and had arranged for an interview the following day. They're desperate for a qualified teacher, Catherine explained as they sat around the dinner table. The fall term starts in 2 weeks, and they have no one. When I mentioned your father was a Harvard professor, they practically begged me to bring you in. Clara felt a flutter of nervousness and excitement. Do you really think I could do it? Without a doubt, Catherine assured her. Most of the children are eager to learn, and the troublemakers respond well to firm boundaries. Besides, you'll have me to help you get started. And you'll have a place to stay for as long as you need, Caleb added. No need to rush into town lodgings until you're settled. Clara looked between the siblings, overwhelmed by their support. I don't know how to thank you both. Say yes to the interview, Catherine said with a smile. That's thanks enough. The next morning, Clara dressed carefully in her new dress, a simple blue calico that nevertheless fit better than Catherine's borrowed clothes. She pinned her hair in a neat style appropriate for a potential teacher and tried to calm her nerves as Caleb hitched the horses to the wagon. You look beautiful, Caleb said when she emerged from the house. And very professional. Clara smiled gratefully. I'm terribly nervous. You'll be wonderful, he assured her, helping her up to the wagon seat. Just be yourself. That's more than enough. The ride to Promise Creek was filled with Catherine's advice about the school board members and stories about the students Clara might soon be teaching. Caleb drove the wagon, occasionally adding his own observations about the town and its inhabitants. As they approached Promise Creek, Clara felt a flutter of anxiety. This would be her first time back in town since the disastrous wedding day. What would people say? How would they look at her? Caleb seemed to sense her discomfort. Hold your head high, he said quietly. You have nothing to be ashamed of. The town was busy when they arrived, with people going about their daily business. Clara felt eyes turn toward the wagon as they passed, but the looks she received were more curious than condemning. Catherine directed Caleb to stop in front of a modest building with a sign identifying it as the Promise Creek Schoolhouse. The board is meeting inside, she explained, helping Clara down from the wagon. I'll introduce you, then Caleb and I will wait at the mercantile, or what's left of it. Clara nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. Thank you both for coming with me. We wouldn't be anywhere else, Caleb said, his eyes conveying more than his words. Inside the schoolhouse, Clara found 5 people waiting, 3 men and 2 women, all regarding her with open curiosity. Catherine made the introductions, then tactfully withdrew, leaving Clara to face her potential employers. The interview began formally, with questions about her education and teaching experience. Clara answered honestly, acknowledging her lack of formal teaching credentials, but emphasizing her extensive education and her experience tutoring younger students in Boston. "Miss Finley," said Mrs. Harding, a stern-looking woman with kind eyes, "we understand you came to Promise Creek as a mail-order bride. Given the unusual circumstances of your arrival, are you certain you intend to remain in our community?" Clara met the woman's gaze steadily. "Yes, Mrs. Harding, I am. What happened with Mr. Wallace was unfortunate, but it has led me to discover that this territory offers opportunities one never imagined. I've found friends here and a potential purpose that excites me. I plan to build a new life in Promise Creek if you'll have me." Her sincerity seemed to satisfy the board. The questions became more practical after that: her approach to discipline, her thoughts on curriculum, her ability to handle students of various ages and abilities. By the time the interview concluded, Clara felt cautiously optimistic. The board members seemed impressed with her articulate responses and obvious intelligence. Mr. Peterson, the board chairman, stood and offered his hand. "We'll discuss your application and let you know our decision by tomorrow," he said. "But speaking personally, Miss Finley, I believe you would be an asset to our school." "Thank you, sir," Clara replied, shaking his hand firmly. "I appreciate the opportunity." Outside, she found Caleb waiting alone, leaning against the wagon. "Catherine's at the dressmaker's," he explained. "How did it go?" "I think it went well," Clara said, unable to contain a smile. "They seemed pleased with my answers." "Of course they were," Caleb said, returning her smile. "They'd be fools not to hire you." While they waited for Catherine, Caleb suggested a walk through town. "Might as well let people see you and get the gossip over with," he said practically. "The sooner you're a familiar sight, the sooner they'll find something else to talk about." Clara agreed, and they strolled down the main street together. She was acutely aware of the curious glances and whispered comments, but with Caleb beside her, she found the courage to hold her head high. They stopped at the remains of the mercantile, where rebuilding was already underway. "Folks around here don't waste time," Caleb observed. "Mr. Harding hopes to be back in business within a month." "That's impressive," Clara said, watching the men work. "There's such a sense of community here." "It's necessary for survival," Caleb replied. "Out here, we depend on each other." As they continued their walk, several people greeted Caleb by name, their curious gazes lingering on Clara. Caleb introduced her simply as Miss Finley, who's interviewing for the teaching position, making no mention of her previous connection to Samuel Wallace. Clara was grateful for his tact. They found Catherine at the dressmaker's shop, engaged in animated conversation with the proprietress. She introduced Clara warmly, and soon the three women were discussing fabrics and patterns for work-appropriate dresses. "You'll need at least 2 more dresses if you're to be a teacher," Catherine insisted. "Mrs. Thornton can have them ready within a week." Clara hesitated, thinking of her limited funds, but Catherine waved away her concerns. "Consider it an investment in your future," she said. "You can repay me from your first month's salary." The afternoon passed pleasantly as they visited various businesses in town. By the time they headed back to the ranch, Clara felt she had made a small but significant step toward acceptance in the community. "That wasn't so bad, was it?" Caleb asked as they drove home. Clara shook her head. "No, it wasn't. Everyone was quite civil." "This town needs good people," Catherine said from the back of the wagon. "They'll judge you by what you do now, not by what happened in the past." That evening, after Catherine had gone to bed, Clara and Caleb sat on the porch as usual. The night was clear, with a full moon illuminating the landscape in silver light. "Thank you for today," Clara said softly, "for standing beside me in town. It made everything easier." "I'll always stand beside you if you need me," Caleb replied, his voice equally quiet. "You showed real courage today, Clara." She turned toward him, studying his face in the moonlight. It's easier to be brave when you're not alone. Caleb reached for her hand, a gesture that was becoming familiar between them. You don't have to be alone anymore. The words hung in the air between them, full of meaning and possibility. Clara's heart raced as Caleb leaned toward her slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, she moved to meet him, and their lips touched in a gentle, questioning kiss. It was brief but perfect, a promise, a beginning. When they drew apart, Caleb's eyes searched hers. "Too soon?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Clara shook her head. "No," she whispered. "Just right." This time when he kissed her, it was deeper, more certain. His hand came up to cup her cheek, and she leaned into his touch, her heart singing with newfound joy. When they finally parted, they were both breathing faster, smiling in the moonlight. "I've wanted to do that for days," Caleb confessed, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "I've wanted you to," Clara admitted, feeling bold and shy all at once. They sat together for a long time after that, talking quietly, exchanging occasional soft kisses, learning the contours of this new territory between them. When they finally said goodnight, Clara felt as though she was floating rather than walking to her bed. In the morning, a messenger arrived from town with a letter from the school board. Clara's hands trembled as she broke the seal and read the contents. "They've offered me the position," she announced to Caleb and Catherine, who were waiting anxiously. "Full responsibility for the younger students and assisting Catherine with the older ones. I can start next week." Congratulations filled the kitchen as Catherine hugged her and Caleb squeezed her hand, his eyes full of pride. The salary was modest but sufficient, and the position came with the option to rent a small cabin behind the schoolhouse once she was settled. "This calls for a celebration," Catherine declared. "I'll make a special dinner tonight." As Catherine bustled about making plans, Caleb drew Clara outside to the porch. "I'm proud of you," he said, taking both her hands in his. "This is just the beginning for you here." Clara smiled up at him. "For us, I hope." The warmth in his eyes was answer enough before he leaned down to kiss her softly. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Clara prepared for her new role. She spent hours with Catherine, learning about the students and the curriculum. She visited the school daily, organizing books and materials, and decorating the classroom to make it welcoming. In the evenings, she returned to the ranch, where Caleb was always waiting. Their relationship deepened steadily, each day bringing new discoveries about each other. They spoke of books and dreams, shared childhood memories, and gradually built a foundation of trust and understanding. When the first day of school arrived, Clara was nervous but prepared. The children regarded her with curiosity at first, but her warm manner and obvious enthusiasm soon won them over. By the end of the week, even the most reluctant students were responding to her encouragement. Teaching brought Clara a satisfaction she had never expected. Each small victory, a struggling reader sounding out a difficult word, a shy child answering a question, a puzzled face clearing with understanding filled her with joy. She wrote to her aunt in Boston, describing her new life with an excitement that would have been unimaginable just weeks before. Meanwhile, her relationship with Caleb continued to flourish. Though she spent weekdays in town, staying in the small cabin behind the schoolhouse, she returned to the ranch each weekend. These reunions were increasingly precious to both of them, and it wasn't long before the entire community recognized that something special was growing between the new teacher and the rancher. One crisp October evening, as they walked along the creek that ran through Caleb's property, he stopped beneath a cottonwood tree and turned to face her. "Clara," he said, taking her hands in his, "these past 2 months have been the happiest of my life. I know it may seem fast to some, but I've never been more certain of anything." Clara's heart began to race as he dropped to one knee before her. "I love you," he said simply. "I want to build a life with you, to share everything I have and everything I am. Will you marry me?" Tears of joy filled Clara's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Caleb, I will marry you." He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gold ring set with a modest diamond. "It was my mother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "Catherine brought it west for me when she came." "It's beautiful," Clara said, admiring how the setting caught the light. "And even more precious because it was hers." They walked back to the ranch house hand in hand, where Catherine was waiting. One look at their faces told her everything, and she rushed forward to embrace them both. "It's about time," she exclaimed, laughing through happy tears. "I was beginning to think you'd never ask her, brother." "You knew?" Clara asked, surprised. "Of course I knew," Catherine replied. "Caleb asked for the ring last week. Besides, anyone with eyes could see you two were meant for each other." That night, as they sat together on the porch, Clara leaned against Caleb's shoulder, her hand in his, the ring a comforting weight on her finger. "It's strange to think that if Samuel Wallace hadn't jilted me, I would never have found you," she mused. Caleb pressed a kiss to her temple. "I like to think we would have found each other somehow. But I'm grateful every day that I was passing the church that afternoon." "Let me take you home," Clara quoted softly. "Those were the first kind words I heard that day." "And now it's your home too," Caleb said. "It always will be." News of their engagement spread quickly through Promise Creek. Most people responded with genuine happiness for them, though there were a few raised eyebrows at the speed of their courtship. Clara found she didn't care about the gossips. Her happiness was too complete to be dimmed by wagging tongues. They set the wedding date for Christmas Eve, giving them time to prepare while honoring Clara's wish for a winter wedding. Unlike her previous engagement, this one filled her with joy rather than anxiety. She knew Caleb, his strengths and flaws, his dreams and fears, and loved him all the more for his honesty. The weeks leading up to the wedding were busy ones. Clara continued teaching, now with the added pleasure of planning her future with Caleb. They decided she would finish the school term, then move to the ranch permanently. Catherine, rather than feeling displaced, was delighted by the arrangement. "I've been thinking of taking a position at the school in Copper Springs," she confided to Clara. "They've offered me the head teacher role there, but I've hesitated because of Caleb. Now I can accept without worry, knowing he'll have you." "Are you sure?" Clara asked, concerned. "I never want you to feel pushed out of your home." Catherine squeezed her hand. "I'm positive. This is your home now, with Caleb. And I'll only be 20 miles away, close enough to visit often, but far enough to give you newlyweds some privacy." As December arrived, bringing cold winds and occasional snow flurries, wedding preparations intensified. Clara's students made decorations for the church, and the women of Promise Creek helped sew her wedding dress, an elegant creation of ivory satin with lace trim. 5 days before the wedding, as Clara was teaching her class, the door to the schoolhouse burst open. A man stood there, disheveled and unshaven, his clothes travel-stained. It took Clara a moment to recognize Samuel Wallace. "Clara," he slurred, clearly drunk even at this early hour. "I've come back for you." The children stared wide-eyed as Clara rose from her desk, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Class, please open your readers to page 42 and read silently until I return." She walked to the door, took Samuel's arm firmly, and guided him outside, closing the door behind them. "What are you doing here, Mr. Wallace?" she asked coldly. Samuel swayed on his feet. "I made a mistake," he said, reaching for her. "I never should have left you. We can still be married. I've got prospects now, real prospects." Clara stepped back, avoiding his touch. "I'm engaged to someone else, Mr. Wallace. Even if I weren't, I would never marry you now. Please leave." Anger flashed in his bloodshot eyes. Who are you engaged to?" "That's none of your concern," Clara replied, turning to go back inside. Samuel grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in painfully. "It's that rancher, isn't it? Reed? I've heard the gossip. You didn't waste any time finding a replacement." "Let go of me," Clara said, her voice low but firm. "You have no right to question my choices, not after what you did." "You're my bride," Samuel insisted, his grip tightening. "I paid for you to come west. You belong to me." "I belong to no one but myself," Clara retorted, trying to pull away. "Now let me go before—" "Before what?" Samuel sneered. "Before I make you let her go." They both turned to see Caleb standing a few feet away, his expression dangerously calm. Clara had never been so relieved to see anyone in her life. "This isn't your business, Reed," Samuel spat. "This is between me and my fiancé." "Ex-fiancé," Clara corrected, finally wrenching her arm free. "And it very much is Caleb's business, as he's going to be my husband in 5 days. Samuel's face contorted with rage. "You think you can just replace me? After I spent good money bringing you here?" "Money you borrowed and never intended to repay," Caleb said evenly. "Just like the money you owe half the businesses in town. You're lucky the sheriff didn't arrest you the moment you showed your face here again." "I came back for what's mine," Samuel insisted, lunging toward Clara. Caleb moved faster, stepping between them and pushing Samuel back with a firm hand to the chest. "Clara has made her choice," he said, his voice quiet but filled with steel. "It's not you. Now I suggest you leave town before the sheriff hears you're back. He's still mighty upset about those bad checks you wrote." For a tense moment, it seemed Samuel might try to fight. Then his shoulders slumped, the bravado draining out of him. "You'll regret this," he muttered to Clara. "Both of you." "The only thing I regret," Clara said clearly, "is ever agreeing to marry you in the first place. Goodbye, Mr. Wallace." Samuel glared at them both, then turned and stumbled away down the street. Caleb watched until he was out of sight before turning to Clara. "Are you all right?" he asked, gently examining her arm where Samuel had grabbed her. "I'm fine," Clara assured him, though her heart was still racing. "How did you know to come?" "One of your students ran to fetch me," Caleb explained. "Timothy," said a scary man, "had come to the school looking for you." Clara smiled despite the situation. "I'll have to thank him, but I should get back to my class." "I'll stay nearby until school lets out," Caleb said, "just in case Wallace decides to come back." "You don't have to, I want to," Caleb interrupted, his eyes serious. "I won't let him near you again, Clara." She reached up to touch his cheek. "My protector," she said softly. "Always," he promised, pressing a quick kiss to her palm. Clara returned to her classroom to find 25 children pretending to read while obviously bursting with curiosity. She answered their questions with as much patience and discretion as she could, then firmly redirected their attention to their lessons. After school, Caleb escorted her to the sheriff's office, where they reported Samuel's return and his threatening behavior. Sheriff Dawson promised to keep an eye out for Wallace and ensure he left town. "Don't you worry, Miss Finley," he assured her. "We won't let him ruin your wedding this time." The incident with Samuel cast a brief shadow over the wedding preparations, but it faded quickly as the day itself approached. Clara refused to let fear dim her happiness, though Caleb was noticeably more protective, insisting on escorting her to and from school each day. On Christmas Eve morning, Clara woke in her small cabin behind the schoolhouse to find snow falling gently outside her window. It was as if nature itself was decorating for her wedding. Catherine arrived early to help her prepare, bringing with her the completed wedding dress and a small bouquet of winter greenery and dried flowers. "Nervous?" Catherine asked as she helped Clara with her hair. "Not about marrying Caleb," Clara replied truthfully. "Only that something might go wrong." Catherine squeezed her shoulders reassuringly. "Nothing will go wrong. The church is decorated, the Reverend is ready, and Caleb is probably pacing a hole in Mrs. Gunderson's floor as we speak." Clara laughed, feeling some of her tension ease. You're right. This time will be different.
And it was.
When Clara walked into the church on Sheriff Dawson's arm, he had offered to give her away in the absence of her father. The building was filled with people, her students and their families, neighbors, friends they had made in the community. But Clara saw only Caleb, waiting for her at the altar, his eyes shining with love and wonder. Unlike her first wedding day, there were no tears of despair as she took her place beside the man she loved. When the Reverend asked, "Who gives this woman?" Sheriff Dawson answered firmly, "Her friends and neighbors in Promise Creek," causing a ripple of approving murmurs through the congregation. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Clara and Caleb had written their own vows, promises of love and partnership that moved many in the audience to tears. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb's kiss was tender yet passionate, a perfect balance that symbolized their relationship. The celebration afterward was held in the town hall, decorated with evergreen boughs and candles. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, as the community celebrated not just a wedding but the healing of a wound in their midst. Clara, once the jilted bride, was now a beloved teacher and a happily married woman. As she danced in her husband's arms, Clara felt a sense of completion she had never known before. "Happy," Caleb murmured against her ear. "Perfectly," she replied, looking up at him with all the love in her heart. "This is where I belong. With you." Later that night, after they had returned to the ranch house, now their home together, Caleb carried Clara across the threshold as tradition dictated. Inside, he had prepared a surprise. The main room was lit with candles, a small Christmas tree stood in the corner adorned with simple ornaments, and a fire crackled welcomingly in the hearth. "It's beautiful," Clara breathed, taking in the scene. "Catherine helped," Caleb admitted, setting her gently on her feet. "I wanted our first night here as husband and wife to be special." Clara turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. "It's special because we're together," she said softly. "Everything else is just extra." Caleb's arms tightened around her. "I love you, Clara Reed," he said, testing her new name. "And I love you, Caleb Reed," she replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Now and always." Spring came to Reed Ranch with a burst of wildflowers and new beginnings. Clara finished the school year as planned, then turned her full attention to making the ranch house a home. Under her care, the garden expanded, the bookshelves filled, and the rooms became warmer and more inviting. Catherine had moved to Copper Springs as intended, but visited often, delighted by the changes in both the ranch and her brother. Caleb smiled more, laughed more, and approached his work with renewed energy and purpose. As for Clara, she had found a happiness she had never imagined possible. She continued to write, filling journals with stories of frontier life and the people she had come to love. She helped with the ranch work when needed, learned to make cheese and butter for Mrs. Gunderson, and even became a decent shot with a rifle Caleb had given her as a wedding present. On a warm evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Clara took Caleb's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "I have something to tell you," she said, her eyes shining. "We're going to have a baby." Joy spread across Caleb's face like the dawn. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. "You're sure?" Clara nodded, laughing as he pulled her into a gentle embrace. "Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday. He says the baby should arrive around Christmas." "A Christmas baby," Caleb marveled, his hand still resting protectively over their unborn child. "The best gift I could imagine." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. "I was thinking today about how much has changed in a year," she said thoughtfully. "Last summer, I was alone and afraid, abandoned at the altar. Now I have you, this home, our child on the way. And a whole community that cares for you," Caleb added. "Yes." Clara smiled. It's strange to think that the worst moment of my life led to the best ones. Caleb kissed her temple softly. I thank God every day that I happen to be passing that church, he said. That I found the courage to speak to you. Let me take you home, Clara quoted again, her voice tender with memory. The words that changed everything. The best words I ever spoke, Caleb agreed, drawing her closer as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. They sat together in contented silence, watching night fall over the land that was their home and would someday belong to their children. The ranch house behind them glowed with warm light, a beacon of the love and life they had built together, all because a heartbroken bride had been given a second chance at happiness, and a kind-hearted cowboy had offered to take her home.